Okay. Hey guys, it's Abby Vlogs here, and today I am going to be rereading chapters 11 and 12 from Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone because today when I went on, I had gotten a notification on my email saying that my video was taken down. My stream was taken down last night, and it's all because of something so stupid. You see, since I'm in my new room, it is hard to hide stuff that I'm afraid I'm going to get demonetized or copyrighted, which I did yesterday. All over my computer being positioned like this, and it was facing my TV, which had an episode of Dropped on the Food Network. And you couldn't even really see the TV because of my light being right next to my TV, and it kept getting bright where you couldn't see the TV screen. So I had to trim my video, my live stream, and it took out some of the parts where I was reading. And so I'm just rereading the chapters because YouTube decided to be really stupid about this. You couldn't even see my TV. You couldn't even see the screen, actually. You could see my TV, but you couldn't really see what was on TV because the light brightness. So now I'm going to be rereading the chapters, and YouTube, if you are somehow managing this, you couldn't even see my TV screen because of the light brightness, so you couldn't see what's going on TV. So why did I get in trouble for this? Because a multitude of YouTubers do this. Is it because I am not verified on YouTube? If it is, then that's stupid, and all verified YouTubers should not have their verified thing if they have copyright stuff. Because this is stupid. This is a stupid rule. I get the rule. But if you cannot see my TV screen and what's on it, then you should not have copyrighted me. Because you could barely see what was on the TV. Very little glimpses. Yes, I made the mistake of leaving my stupid TV on. But you should have not taken down my video, made me trim my video. All over a little tiny snippet of a thing on Food Network. So now I have to reread 2 chapters. So thanks a lot, YouTube. This is why a lot of people go to Twitch, because Twitch is better than YouTube. So now I will gladly reread chapters 11, Quidditch, and 12, The Mirror of Erised. And YouTube, if you copyright this video, then I will make sure no one comes on this platform again. I will make sure of that. I will blast you all over social media if I have to. I don't want to resort to that, but I can't. I don't understand why you would copyright me over something so small and over something you barely see. Literally. Chapter 11, Quidditch. As they entered November, the weather turned very cold. The mountains around the school became icy gray and the lake like chilled steel. Every morning the ground was covered in frost. Hagrid could be seen from the upstairs windows to frosting broomsticks on the Quidditch field. Bundled up in a long moleskin overcoat, rabbit fur gloves, and enormous beaver skin boots. The Quidditch season had begun. On Saturday, Harry would be playing in his first match after weeks of training, Gryffindor versus Slytherin. If Gryffindor won, they would move up into second place in the House Championship. Hardly anyone had seen Harry play because Wood had decided that as their secret weapon, Harry should be kept, well, secret. But the news that he was playing Seeker had leaked out somehow, and Harry didn't know which was worse, people telling him he'd be brilliant or people telling him they'd be running around underneath him holding a mattress. It was really lucky that Harry now had Hermione as a friend. He didn't know how he'd have gotten through all his homework without her. With all the last-minute Quidditch practice Wood was making them do. She had also lent him Quidditch Through the Ages, which turned out to be a very interesting read. Harry learned that there were 700 ways of committing a Quidditch foul, and that all of them had happened during a World Cup match in 1473. That Seekers were usually the smallest and fastest players, and that most serious Quidditch accidents seemed to happen to them. That although people rarely died playing Quidditch, referees had been known to vanish and turn up months later in the Sahara Desert. Hermione had become a bit more relaxed about breaking rules since Harry and Ron had saved her from the mountain troll, and she was much nicer for it. The day before Harry's first Quidditch match, the three of them were out in the freezing country courtyard. During break, and she had conjured them up a bright blue fire that could be carried around in a jam jar. They were standing with their backs to it, getting warm, when Snape crossed the yard. Harry noticed at once that Snape was limping. Harry, Ron, and Hermione moved closer together to block the fire from view. They were sure it wouldn't be allowed. Unfortunately, something about their guilty faces caught Snape's eye. He limped over. He hadn't seen the fire, but he seemed to be looking for a reason to tell them off anyway. "What's that you got there, Potter?" "It was Quidditch Through the Ages." Harry showed him. "Library books are not to be taken outside the school," said Snape. "Give it to me." 5 points from Gryffindor. "He's just made that rule up," Harry muttered angrily as Snape limped away. "Wonder what's wrong with his leg." "Don't know, but I hope it's really hurting him," said Ron bitterly. The Gryffindor common room was very noisy that evening. Harry, Ron, and Hermione sat together next to a window. Hermione was checking Harry and Ron's charms homework for them. She would never let them copy. "How will you learn?" But by asking her to read it through, they got the right answers anyway. Harry felt restless. He wanted Quidditch Through the Ages back to take his mind off his nerves about tomorrow. Why should he be afraid of Snape? Getting up, he told Ron and Hermione he was going to ask Snape if he could have it. "Better you than me," they said together, but Harry had an idea that Snape wouldn't refuse if there were other teachers listening. He made his way down to the staff room and knocked. There was no answer. He knocked again. Nothing. Perhaps Snape had left the book in there. It was worth a try. He pushed the door ajar and peered inside, and a horrible scene met his eyes. Snape and Filch were inside alone. Snape was holding his robes above his knees. One of his legs was bloody and mangled. Filch was handing Snape bandages. "Blasted thing," Snape was saying. "How are you supposed to keep your eyes on all three heads at once?" Harry tried to shut the door quietly, but "Potter!" Snape's face was twisted with fury as he dropped his robes quickly to hide his leg. Harry gulped. "I just wondered if I could have my book back." "Get out! Out!" Harry left before Snape could take any more points from Gryffindor. He sprinted back upstairs. "Did you get it?" Ron asked as Harry joined them. "What's the matter?" In a low whisper, Harry told them what he'd seen. "We know what this means," he finished breathlessly. "He tried to get past the three-headed dog at Halloween. That's where he was going when we saw him. He was after whatever it's guarding. And I'd bet my broomstick he let the troll in to make a diversion." Hermione's eyes were wide. "No, he wouldn't," she said. "I know he's not very nice, but he wouldn't try and steal something Dumbledore was keeping safe. Honestly, Hermione, you think all teachers are saints or something," snapped Ron. "I'm with Harry. I wouldn't put anything past Snape. But what's he after? What's that dog guarding?" Harry went to bed with his head buzzing with the same question. Neville was snoring loudly, but Harry couldn't sleep. He tried to empty his mind. He needed to sleep. He had to. He had his first Quidditch match in a few hours, but the expression on Snape's face when Harry had seen his leg wasn't easy to forget. The next morning dawned, very bright and cold. The great hall was full of delicious smell of was it full of the delicious smell of fried sausages and the cheerful chatter of everyone looking forward to a good Quidditch match. You've got to eat some breakfast. I don't want anything. Just a bit of toast, wheedled Hermione. I'm not hungry. Harry felt terrible. In an hour's time, he'd be walking onto the field. Harry, you need your strength, said Seamus Finnegan. Seekers are always the one who get clobbered by the other team. Thanks, Seamus, said Harry, watching Seamus pile ketchup on his sausages. By 11 o'clock, the whole school seemed to be out in the stands around the Quidditch pitch. Many students had binoculars. The seats might be raised high in the air, but it was still difficult to see what was going on sometimes. Ron and Hermione joined Neville, Seamus, and Dean, the West Ham fan, up in the top row. As a surprise for Harry, they had painted a large banner on one of the sheets Scabbers had ruined. It said Potter for president, and Dean, who was good at drawing, had done a large Gryffindor lion underneath. Then Hermione had performed a tricky little charm so that the paint flashed different colors. Meanwhile, in the locker room, Harry and the rest of the team were changing into their scarlet Quidditch robes. Slytherin would be plain and green. Wood cleared his throat for silence. Okay, men, he said, and women, said Chaser Angelina Johnson. And women, Wood agreed. This is it. The big one, said Fred Weasley. The one we've all been waiting for, said George. We know Oliver's speech by heart, Fred told Harry. We were on the team last year. Shut up, you two, said Wood. This is the best team Gryffindor's had in years. We're going to win, I know it. He glared at them as all as if to say, or else. Right, it's time. Good luck, all of you. Harry followed Fred and George out of the locker room and, hoping his knees weren't going to give way, walked onto the field to loud cheers. Madame Hooch was refereeing. She stood in the middle of the field waiting for the two teams, her broom in her hand. Now I want a nice fair game, all of you, she said. Once they were all gathered around her, Harry noticed that she seemed to be speaking particularly to the Slytherin captain Marcus Flint, a fifth year. Harry thought Flint looked as if he had some troll blood in him. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw the fluttering banner high above, flashing Potter for president over the crowd. His heart skipped. He felt braver. Mount your brooms, please. Harry clambered onto his Nimbus 2000. Madame Hooch gave a loud blast on her silver whistle. 15 brooms rose up high into the air. They were off, and the quaffle was taken immediately by Angelina Johnson of Gryffindor. What an excellent chaser that girl is, and rather attractive, too. Jordan. Sorry, Professor. The Weasley twins' friend Lee Jordan was doing the commentary for the match, closely watched by Professor McGonagall. And she's really belting along up there, and a neat pass to Alicia Spinnet, a good friend of Oliver Wood's, last year only a reserve, back to Johnson, and no, the Slytherins have taken the quaffle. Slytherin captain Marcus Flint gains the quaffle, and off he goes. Flint flying like an eagle up there. He's going to get stopped by an excellent move by Gryffindor keeper Wood, and the Gryffindors take the quaffle. That's Chaser Katie Bell of Gryffindor there. Nice dive around Flint, off up the field, and ouch, that must have hurt. Hit in the back of the head by a bludger. Quaff taken by the Slytherins. That's Adrian Puncy speeding off toward the goal post, but he's blocked by a second bludger sent his way by Fred or George Weasley. Can't tell which, but nice play by the Gryffindor beater anyway. And Johnson back in possession of the quaffle. A clear field ahead, and off she goes. She's really flying, dodges a speeding bludger. The goal post are ahead. Come on now, Angelina. Keeper Bletchley dives, misses. Gryffindor scores. Gryffindor cheers filled the cold air with howls and moans from the Slytherins. Budge up there, move along. Hagrid! Ron and Hermione squeezed together to give Hagrid enough space to join them. Been watching from me hut, said Hagrid, patting a large pair of binoculars around his neck. But it isn't the same as being in the crowd. No sign of the snitch yet, eh? Nope, said Ron. Harry hasn't had much to do yet. Keep out of trouble, though. That's something, said Hagrid, raising his binoculars and peering skyward at the speck that was Harry. Way up above them, Harry was gliding over the game, squinting about for some sign of the snitch, though this was part of his and Wood's game plan. Keep out of the way until you get until you catch sight of the snitch, Wood had said. We don't want you attacked before you have to be. When Angelina had scored, Harry had done a couple of loop-the-loops to let off his feelings. Now he was back staring around for the snitch. Once he caught sight of a flash of gold, but it was just a reflection from one of the Weasleys' wristwatches. And once a bludger decided to come pelting his way, more like a cannonball than anything, but Harry dodged it, and Fred Weasley came chasing after it. "All right there, Harry," he had time to yell as he beat the bludger furiously toward Marcus Flint. "Slytherin in possession," Lee Jordan was saying. Chaser Punsey ducks 2 bludgers, 2 Weasleys, and Chaser Bell and speeds toward the— Wait a moment, was that the snitch? A murmur ran through the crowd as Adrian Punsey dropped the quaffle, too busy looking over his shoulder at the flash of gold that had passed his left ear. Harry saw it. In a great rush of excitement, he dived downward after the streak of gold. Slytherin seeker Terence Higgs had seen it too. Neck and neck, they hurled toward the snitch. All the chasers seemed to have forgotten what they were supposed to be doing as they hung in midair to watch. Harry was faster than Higgs. He could see the little round ball wings fluttering, darting up ahead. He put on an extra spurt of speed. Wham! A roar of rage echoed from the Gryffindors below. Marcus Flint had blocked Harry on purpose, and Harry's broom spun off course. Harry holding on for dear life. "Foul!" screamed the Gryffindors. Madam Hooch spoke angrily to Flint and then ordered a free shot at the goalpost for Gryffindors. But in all the confusion, of course, the golden snitch had disappeared from sight again. Down in his stands, Dean Thomas was yelling, "Send him off, ref! Red card." "What are you talking about, Dean?" said Ron. "Red card," said Dean furiously. "In soccer, you get shown the red card and you're out of the game. But this isn't soccer," Ron reminded him. Hagrid, however, was on Dean's side. They ought to change the rules. Flint could have knocked Harry out of the air. Lee Jordan was finding it difficult not to take sides. So after the obvious and disgusting bit of cheating, "Jordan," growled Professor McGonagall. After that open and revolting foul. "Jordan, I'm warning you." All right. Flint nearly closed a Gryffindor seeker, which could happen to anyone, I'm sure. So a penalty to Gryffindor taken by Spinnet, who puts it away. No trouble, and we continue play. Gryffindor still in possession. It was as Harry dodged another bludger, which went spinning dangerously past his head, that it happened. His broom gave a sudden, frightening lurch. For a split second, he thought he was going to fall. He gripped the broom tightly with both his hands and knees. He'd never felt anything like that. It happened again. It was as though the broom was trying to buck him off, but Nimbus 2000 did not suddenly decide to buck their riders off. Harry tried to turn back toward the Gryffindor goalpost. He had half a mind to ask Wood to call a timeout, and then he realized that his broom was completely out of his control. He couldn't turn it. He couldn't direct it at all. It was zigzagging through the air, and every now and then making violent swishing movements that almost unseated him. Lee was still commentating. Slytherin in possession, Flint with the quaffle, passes Spinnet, passes Bell, hit hard in the face by a bludger. Hope it broke his nose. Only joking, Professor. Slytherin score. Oh no. The Slytherins were cheering. No one seemed to have noticed that Harry's broom was behaving strangely. It was carrying him slowly higher away from the game, jerking and twitching as it went. "Don't know what Harry thinks he's doing," Hagrid mumbled. He stared through his binoculars. If I didn't know better, I'd say he'd lost control of his broom, but he can't have. Suddenly people were pointing up at Harry all over the stands. His broom had started to roll over and over with him, only just managing to hold on. Then the whole crowd gasped. Harry's broom had given a wild jerk and Harry swung off it. He was now dangling from it, holding on with only one hand. "Did something happen to it when Flint blocked him?" Seamus whispered. "Can't have," Hagrid said, his voice shaking. "Can't nothing interfere with broomstick except powerful dark magic. No kid could do that to a Nimbus 2000. At these words, Hermione seized Hagrid's binoculars, but instead of looking up at Harry, she started looking frantically at the crowd. "What are you doing?" moaned Ron, gray-faced. "I knew it," Hermione gasped. "Snape, look." Ron grabbed the binoculars. Snape was in the middle of the stands opposite them. He had his eyes fixed on Harry and was muttering nonstop under his breath. "He's doing something, jinxing the broom," said Hermione. "What should we do?" "Leave it to me." Before Ron could say another word, Hermione had disappeared. Ron turned the binoculars back on Harry. His broom was vibrating so hard it was almost impossible for him to hang on much longer. The whole crowd was on its feet, watching terrified as the Weasleys flew up to try and pull Harry safely onto one of their brooms, but it was no good. Every time they got near him, the broom would jump higher still. They dropped lower and circled beneath him, obviously hoping to catch him if he fell. Marcus Flint seized the quaffle and scored 5 times without anyone noticing. Come on, Hermione, Ron muttered desperately. Hermione had fought her way through the stand where Snape stood and was now racing along the row behind him. She didn't even stop to say sorry as she knocked Professor Quirrell headfirst into the row in front. Reaching Snape, she crouched down, pulled out her wand, and whispered a few well-chosen words. Bright blue flames shot from her wand onto the hem of Snape's robes. It perhaps took 30 seconds for Snape to realize that he was on fire. A sudden yelp told her that she had done her job. Scooping the fire off him into a little jar in her pocket, she scrambled back along the row. Snape would never know what happened. It was enough. Up in the air, Harry was suddenly able to clamber back onto his room. Neville, you can look now, Ron said. Neville had been sobbing in Hagrid's jacket for the last 5 minutes. Harry was speeding toward the ground when the crowd saw him clasp his hand to his mouth as though he was about to be sick. He hit the field on all fours, coughed, and something gold fell out into his hands. I've got the snip, he shouted, waving it above his head, and the game ended in complete confusion. He didn't catch it. He nearly swallowed it. Flint was still howling 20 minutes later, but it made no difference. Harry hadn't broken any rules, and Lee Jordan was still happily shouting the results. Gryffindor had won by 170 points to 60. Harry heard none of this, though. He was being made a cup of strong tea back in Hagrid's hut with Ron and Hermione. It was Snape, Ron was explaining. Hermione and I saw him. He was cursing your broomstick, muttering he wouldn't take his eyes off you. Rubbish, said Hagrid, who hadn't heard a word of what had gone on next to him in the stands. Why would Snape do something like that? Harry, Ron, and Hermione looked at one another, wondering what to tell him. Harry decided on the truth. I found out something about him, he told Hagrid. He tried to get past that 3-headed dog on Halloween. It bit him. We think he was trying to steal whatever it's guarding. Hagrid dropped the teapot. How do you know about Fluffy? He said. Fluffy? Yeah, he's mine. Bought him off a Greek chappie I met in the pub last year. I lent him to Dumbledore to guard the... Yes? Said Harry eagerly. Now don't ask me any more, said Hagrid gruffly. That's top secret, that is. But Snape is trying to steal it. Rubbish, said Hagrid again. Snape's a Hogwarts teacher. He'd do nothing of the sort. So why did he just try and kill Harry? Cried Hermione. The afternoon's events certainly seemed to have changed her mind about Snape. I know a jinx when I see one, Hagrid. I've read all about them. You've got to keep eye contact, and Snape wasn't blinking at all. I saw him. I'm telling you, you're wrong, said Hagrid hotly. I don't know why Harry's room acted like that, but Snape wouldn't try and kill a student. Now listen to me, all 3 of you. You're meddling in things that don't concern you. It's dangerous. You forget that dog and you forget what it's guarding. That's between Professor Dumbledore and Nicholas Flamel. Aha, said Harry. So there's someone called Nicholas Flamel involved, is there? Hagrid looked furious with himself. Okay, that was chapter 11. I will get to chapter 12 in just a moment. I just need a drink. Hold on, I better let my cat in my room because she's freaking going insane. What? You want to come in or not? Guess not. Okay, I guess she doesn't want in my room, which is completely fine. Now on to chapter 12, The Mirror of Erised. Now this is 21 pages long. between chapter 12 and chapter 13. Christmas was coming. One morning in mid-December, Hogwarts woke to find itself covered in several feet of snow. The lake froze solid, and the Weasley twins were punished for bewitching several snowballs so that they followed Quirrell around, bouncing off the back of his turban. The few owls that managed to battle their way through the stormy sky to deliver mail had to be nursed back to health by Hagrid before they could fly off again. No one could wait for the holidays to start. While the Gryffindor common room and the Great Hall had roaring fires, the drafty corridors had become icy and bitter. Had become icy, and a bitter wind rattled the windows in the classrooms. Worst of all were Professor Snape's classes down in the dungeons, where their breath rose in a mist before them, and they kept as close as possible to their hot cauldrons. "I do feel so sorry," said Draco Malfoy, one potions class, "for all those people who have to stay at Hogwarts for Christmas because they're not wanted at home." He was looking over at Harry as he spoke. Crabbe and Goyle chuckled. Harry, who was measuring a powdered spine of lionfish, ignored them. Malfoy had been even more unpleasant than usual since the Quidditch match. Disgusted that the Slytherins had lost, he had tried to get everyone laughing at how a wide-mouthed tree frog would be replacing Harry as a seeker next. Then he'd realized that nobody found this funny because they were all so impressed at the way Harry had managed to stay on his bucking broomstick, so Malfoy, jealous and angry, had gone back to taunting Harry about having no proper family. It was true that Harry wasn't going back to Privet Drive for Christmas. Professor McGonagall had come around the week before, making a list of students who would be staying for the holidays, and Harry had signed up at once. He didn't feel sorry for himself at all. This would probably be the best Christmas he'd ever had. Ron and his brothers were staying too, because Mr. and Mrs. Weasley were going to Romania to visit Charlie. When they left the dungeons at the end of potions, they found a large fir tree blocking the corridor ahead. Two enormous feet sticking out at the bottom, and a loud puffing sound told them that Hagrid was behind it. "Hi, Hagrid. Want any help?" Ron asked, sticking his head through the branches. "No, I'm all right, thanks, Ron." "Would you mind moving out of the way?" came Malfoy's voice, cold drawl from behind them. "Are you trying to earn some extra money, Weasley? Hoping to be a gamekeeper yourself when you leave Hogwarts? I suppose that hut of Hagrid's must seem like a palace compared to what your family's used to." Ron dived at Malfoy just as Snape came up the stairs. "Weasley!" Ron let go of the front of Malfoy's robes. He was provoked, Professor Snape, said Hagrid, sticking his huge hairy face out from behind the tree. "Malfoy was insulting his family. Leave it as it may. Fighting is against Hogwarts rules, Hagrid," said Snape silkily. 5 points from Gryffindor, Weasley, and be grateful it isn't more. Move along, all of you." Malfoy, Crabbe, and Goyle pushed softly past the tree, scattering needles everywhere and smirking. "I'll get him," said Ron, grinding his teeth at Malfoy's back. "One of these days I'll get him." "I hate them both," said Harry, Malfoy, and Snape. "Come on, cheer up. It's nearly Christmas," said Hagrid. "Tell you what, come with me and see the Great Hall. It looks great. Looks a treat." So the three of them followed Hagrid off and his tree off to the Great Hall, where Professor McGonagall and Professor Flitwick were busy with the Christmas decorations. As Hagrid, the last tree. Put it in the far corner, would you? The hall looked spectacular. Festoons of holly and mistletoe hung all around the walls, and no less than 12 towering Christmas trees stood around the room, some sparkling with tiny icicles, some glittering with hundreds of candles. "How many days you got left to your holiday?" Hagrid asked. "Just one," said Hermione. "And that reminds me, Harry, Ron, we've got half an hour before lunch. We should be in the library." "Oh, yeah, you're right," said Ron, tearing his eyes away from Professor Flitwick, who had golden bubbles blossoming out of his wand and trailing them over the branches of the new tree. "The library," said Hagrid, following them out of the hall. "Just before the holidays, but keen, aren't you?" "Oh, we're not working," Harry told him brightly. "Ever since you mentioned Nicholas Flamel, we've been trying to find out who he is." "You what?" Hagrid looked shocked. "Listen here, I've told you, drop it. It's nothing to you what that dog's garden. We just want to know who Nicholas Flamel is, that's all," said Hermione. "Unless you'd like to tell us and save us the trouble," Harry added. We must have been through hundreds of books already, and we can't find him anywhere. Just give us a hint. I know I've read his name somewhere." "I'm saying nothing," said Hagrid flatly. "Just have to find out ourselves then," said Ron, and they left Hagrid looking disgruntled and hurried off to the library. They had indeed been searching books for Flamel's name ever since Hagrid had let it slip, because how else were they going to find out what Snape was trying to steal? The trouble was, it was very hard to know where to begin, not knowing what Flamel might have done to get himself into a book. He wasn't in great wizards of the 20th century or notable magical names of our time. He was missing, too, from important modern magical discoveries and the study of recent developments in wizardry. And then, of course, there was the sheer size of the library, tens of thousands of books, thousands of shelves, hundreds of narrow rows. Hermione took out a list of subjects and titles she had decided to search while Ron strode off in a row of books and started pulling them off the shelves at random. Harry wandered over to the restricted section. He had been wondering for a while if Flamel wasn't somewhere in there. Unfortunately, he needed a specially signed note from one of the teachers to look in any of these restricted books. He knew he'd never get one. These were the books containing powerful dark magic, never taught at Hogwarts and only read by older students studying advanced defense against the dark arts. "What are you looking for, boy?" "Nothing," said Harry. Madame Pince, the librarian, brandished a feather duster at him. "You'd better get out then. Go on, out." Wishing he'd been a bit quicker at thinking up some story, Harry left the library. He, Ron, and Hermione had already agreed they'd better not ask Madame Pince where they could find Flamel. They were sure she'd be able to tell them, but they couldn't risk Snape hearing what they were up to. Harry waited outside the corridor to see if the other two had found anything, but he wasn't very hopeful. They had been looking for 2 weeks after all, but as they only had odd moments between lessons, it wasn't surprising they'd found nothing. What they really needed was a nice long search without Madame Pince breathing down their necks. 5 minutes later, Ron and Hermione joined him, shaking their heads. They went off to lunch. "You will keep looking while I'm away, won't you?" said Hermione, "and send me an owl if you find anything. And you could ask your parents if they knew who Flamel is," said Ron. "It'd be safe to ask them. Very safe. They're both dentists," said Hermione. Once the holidays had started, Ron and Harry were having too good a time to think much about Flamel. They had the dormitory to themselves, and the common room was far emptier than usual, so they were able to get good armchairs by the fire. They sat by the hour, eating anything they could spare on a toasting fork, bread, English muffins, marshmallows, and plotting ways of getting Malfoy expelled, which were fun to talk about even if they wouldn't work. Ron also started teaching Harry wizard chess. This was exactly like Muggle chess, except the figures were alive, which made it a lot directing troops in battle. Ron's head was very old and battered, like everything else he owned. It had once belonged to someone else in his family, in this case his grandfather. However, old chessmen weren't a drawback at all. Ron knew them so well, he never had trouble getting them to do what he wanted. Harry played with chessmen Seamus Finnegan had lent him, and they didn't trust him at all. He wasn't a very good player yet, and they kept shouting different bits of advice at him, which was confusing. "Don't send me there. Can't you see his knight? Send him. We can afford to lose him." On Christmas Eve, Harry went to bed looking forward to the next day for the food and the fun, but not expecting any presents at all. When he woke early in the morning, however, the first thing he saw was a small pile of packages at the foot of his bed. "Merry Christmas," said Ron sleepily as Harry scrambled out of bed and pulled on his bathrobe. "You too," said Harry. You look at this. I've got some presents." "What did you expect? Turnips?" said Ron, turning to his own pile, which was a lot bigger than Harry's. Harry picked up the top parcel, which was wrapped in thick brown paper. Scrawled across it was, "To Harry from Hagrid." Inside was roughly cut wooden flute. Hagrid had obviously whittled it himself. Harry blew it. It sounded like an owl. A second very small parcel contained a note. "We received your message and enclose your Christmas present from Uncle Vernon and Aunt Petunia." Taped to the note was a 50-pence piece. "That's friendly," said Harry. Ron was fascinated by the 50-pence. "Weird," he said. "What a shape. This is money?" "You can keep it," said Harry, laughing at how pleased Ron was. "Hagrid and my aunt and uncle." "Who sent these?" "I think I know who that one's from," Ron said, turning a bit pink and pointing to a very lumpy parcel. My mom, I told her you didn't expect any presents, and oh no, he groaned. She made you a Weasley sweater. Harry torn open the parcel to find a thick, hand-knitted sweater in emerald green and a large box of homemade fudge. Every year she makes us sweaters, said Ron, unwrapping his own, and mine's always maroon. That's really nice of her, said Harry, trying the fudge, which was very tasty. His next present also contained candy, a large box of chocolate frogs from Hermione. With only left one parcel, Harry picked it up and felt it. It was very light. He unwrapped it. Something fluid and silvery gray went slithering to the floor where it lay in gleaming folds. Ron gasped. I've heard of those, he said in a hushed voice, dropping the box of berry flavored beans he'd gotten from Hermione. If that's what I think it is, they're really rare and really valuable. What is it? Harry picked up the shining silvery cloth off the floor. It was strange to touch, like water woven into material. It's an invisibility cloak, said Ron, a look of awe on his face. I'm sure it is. Try it on. Harry threw the cloak round his shoulders, and Ron gave a yelp. It is. Look down. Harry looked down at his feet, but they were gone. He dashed to the mirror. Sure enough, his reflection looked back at him, just his head suspended in midair, his body completely invisible. He pulled the cloak over his head, and his reflection vanished completely. There's a note, said Ron suddenly. A note fell out of it. Harry pulled off the cloak and seized the letter, written in narrow, loopy writing he had never seen before, with the following words. Your father left this in my possession before he died. It is time it was returned to you. Use it well. A very Merry Christmas to you. I'm making sure I know where the last page is of chapter 12. There was no signature. Harry stared at the note. Ron was admiring the cloak. I'd give anything for one of these. Anything. What's the matter? Nothing, said Harry. He felt very strange. Who had sent him the cloak? Had it really once belonged to his father? Before he could say or think anything else, the dormitory door was flung open and Fred and George Weasley bounded in. Harry stuffed the cloak quickly out of sight. He didn't feel like sharing it with anyone else yet. Merry Christmas. Hey, look, Harry's got a Weasley sweater, too. Fred and George were wearing blue sweaters, one with a large yellow F on it, the other a G. Harry's is better than ours, though, said Fred, holding up Harry's sweater. She obviously makes more of an effort if you're not family. Why aren't you wearing yours, Ron? George demanded. Come on, get it on. They're lovely and warm. I hate maroon. Ron moaned half-heartedly as he put it over his head. You haven't got a letter on yours, George observed. I think she knows you don't forget your name, but we're not stupid. We know we're called Gred and Forge. What's all this noise? Percy Weasley stuck his head through the door, looking disapproving. He had clearly gotten halfway through unwrapping his presents as he too carried a lumpy sweater over his arm, which Fred seized. P for prefect. Get it on, Percy. Come on, we're all wearing ours. Even Harry got one. I don't want, said Percy thickly as the twins forced the sweater over his head, knocking his glasses askew. And you're not sitting with the prefects today either, said George. Christmas is the time for family. They frog marched Percy from the room, his arms pinned to his side by his sweater. Harry had never in all his life had such a Christmas dinner. 100 fat roast turkeys, mountains of roast and boiled potatoes, platters of chipolatas, tureen of buttered peas, silver boats of thick, rich gravy and cranberry sauce, and stacks of wizard crackers every few feet along the table. These fantastic party favors were nothing like the feeble muggle ones that Dursleys usually bought, with their little plastic toys and their flimsy paper hats inside. Harry pulled a wizard cracker with Fred, and it didn't just bang. It went off with a blast like a cannon, engulfed them in a cloud of blue smoke, while from the inside exploded a rear admiral's hat and several live white mice. Up at the high table, Dumbledore had swapped his pointed wizard's hat for a flowered bonnet and was chuckling merrily at a joke Professor Fluick had just read him. Flaming Christmas puddings followed the turkey. Percy nearly broke his teeth on a silver sickle embedded in his slice. Harry watched Hagrid getting redder and redder in the face as he called for more wine, finally kissing Professor McGonagall on the cheek, who, to Harry's amazement, giggled and blushed, her top hat lopsided. Whew. 10 more pages, don't worry. When Harry finally left the table, he was laden down with a stack of things out of the crackers, including a pack of non-explodable luminous balloons, a grow-your-own warts kit, and his own new wizard's chess set. The white mice had disappeared, and Harry had a nasty feeling they were going to end up as Mrs. Norris's Christmas dinner. Harry and Weasley spent a happy afternoon having a furious snowball fight on the grounds. Then, cold, wet, and gasping for breath, they returned to the fire in the Gryffindor common room, where Harry broke in his new chess set by losing spectacularly to Ron. He suspected he wouldn't have lost so badly if Percy hadn't tried to help him so much. After a meal of turkey sandwiches, crumpets, trifle, and Christmas cake, everyone felt too full and sleepy to do much before bed, except sit and watch Percy chase Fred and George all over Gryffindor Tower because they'd stolen his prefect's badge. It had been Harry's best Christmas day ever, yet something had been nagging at the back of his mind all day. Not until he climbed into bed was he free to think about it, the invisibility cloak, and whoever had sent it. Ron, full of turkey and cake, and with nothing mysterious to bother him, fell asleep almost as soon as he'd drawn the curtains of his four-poster. Harry leaned over the side of his own bed and pulled the cloak from under it. His father's. This had been his father's. He let the material flow over his hands, smoother than silk, light as air. Use it well, the note had said. He had to try it now. He slipped out of bed and wrapped the cloak around himself. Looking down at his legs, he only saw moonlight and shadows. It was a very funny feeling. Use it well. Suddenly Harry felt wide awake. The whole of Hogwarts was open to him in this cloak. Excitement flooded through him as he stood there in the dark and silence. He could go anywhere in this world, and Filch would never know. I'm just checking something real quick. Okay. I just had to make sure. Let's see, where was I? Ron grunted in his sleep. Should Harry wake him? Something held him back. His father's cloak. He felt that this time, the first time, he wanted to use it alone. He crept out of the dormitory, down the stairs, across the common room, and climbed through the portrait hole. Who's there? Squawked the fat lady. Harry said nothing. He walked quickly down the corridor. Where should he go? He stopped, his heart racing, and thought, and then it came to him, the restricted section in the library. He'd be able to read as long as he liked, as long as it took to find out who Flamel was. He set off, drawing the invisibility cloak tight around him as he walked. The library was pitch black and very eerie. Harry lit a lamp to see his way along the rows of books. The lamp looked as if it was floating in mid-air, and even though Harry could feel his arm supporting it, the sight gave him the creeps. The restricted section was right at the back of the library. Stepping carefully over the rope that separated these books from the rest of the library, he held up his lamp to read the titles. They didn't tell him much. Their peeling, faded gold letters spelled words in languages Harry couldn't understand. Some had spelled words some had no title at all. One book had a dark stain on it that looked pretty horribly like blood. The hairs on the back of Harry's neck prickled. Maybe he was imagining it, maybe not, but he thought a faint whispering was coming from the books, as though they knew something was there who shouldn't be. He had to start somewhere. Setting the lamp down carefully on the floor, he looked along the bottom shelf for an interesting-looking book. A large black and silver volume caught his eye. He pulled it out with difficulty because it was very heavy, and balancing it on his knee, let it fall open. A piercing, blood-curdling shriek split the silence. The book was screaming. Harry snapped it shut, but the shriek went on and on, one high unbroken ear-splitting note. He stumbled backward and knocked over his lamp, which went out at once. Panicking, he heard footsteps coming down the corridor outside. Stuffing the shrieking book back on the shelf, he ran for it. He passed Filch in the doorway. Filch's pale, wide eyes looked straight through him, and Harry slipped under Filch's outstretched arm and streaked off up the corridor, the book's shriek still ringing in his ears. He came to a sudden halt in front of a tall suit of armor. He had been so busy getting away from the library he hadn't paid attention to where he was going. Perhaps because it was dark, he didn't recognize where he was at all. There was a suit of armor near the kitchens, he knew, but he must have been five floors above there. You asked me to come directly to you, Professor, if anyone was wandering around at night, and somebody's been in the library, restricted section. Harry felt the blood drain out of his face. Whoever he was, Filch must know a shortcut, because his soft, greasy voice was getting nearer, and to his horror, it was Snape who replied, "The restricted section? Well, they can't be far. We'll catch them." Harry stood rooted to the spot as Filch and Snape came round the corner ahead. They couldn't see him, of course, but it was a narrow corridor, and if they came much nearer, they'd knock right into him. The cloak didn't stop him from being solid. He backed away as quietly as he could. A door stood ajar to his left. It was his only hope. He squeezed through it, holding his breath, trying not to move it, and to his relief, he managed to get inside the room without their noticing anything. They walked straight past, and Harry leaned against the wall, breathing deeply, listening to their footsteps dying away that had been close, very close. It was a few seconds before he noticed anything about the room he had hidden in. It looked like an unused classroom. The dark shapes of desks and chairs were piled against the walls, and there was an upturned wastepaper basket, but propped against the wall facing him was something that didn't look as though it belonged there, something that looked as if someone had just put it there to keep it out of the way. It was a magnificent mirror as high as the ceiling, with an ornate gold frame standing on two clawed feet. There was an inscription carved at the top. Irised straw eru oyut ub kafru ut on woshi. His panic fading now that there was no sound of Filch and Snape, Harry moved nearer to the mirror, wanting to look at himself, but seeing no reflection again. He stepped in front of it. He had to clap his hand to his mouth to stop him from screaming. Harry rolled around. He rolled around, his heart pounding far more furiously than when the book had screamed, for he had not seen only himself in the mirror, but a whole crowd of people standing right behind him. But the room was empty. Breathing very fast, he turned slowly back to the mirror. There he was, reflected in it, white and scared looking, and there reflected behind him were at least 10 others. Harry looked over his shoulder, but still no one was there, or were they all invisible too? Was he in fact in a room full of invisible people, and this mirror's trick was that it reflected them, invisible or not? He looked in the mirror again. A woman standing right behind his reflection was smiling at him and waving. He reached out a hand and felt the air behind him. If she was really there, he touched her. Their reflections were so close together, but he felt only air. She and the others existed only in the mirror. She was a very pretty woman. She had dark red hair in her eyes. Her eyes are just like mine, Harry thought, edging a little closer to the glass. Bright green, exactly the same shape, but then he noticed that she was crying, smiling but crying at the same time. The tall, thin, black-haired man standing next to her put his arm around her. He wore glasses and his hair was very untidy. It stuck up at the back, just as Harry's did. Harry was so close to the mirror that now that his nose was nearly touching that of his reflection. "Ugh. Mom," he whispered. "Dad?" They just looked at him, smiling, and slowly Harry looked into the faces of the other people in the mirror and saw other pairs of green eyes like his, other noses like his, even a little old man who looked as though he had Harry's knobbly knees. Harry was looking at his family for the first time in his life. The Potter smiled and waved at Harry, and he stared hungrily back at them, his hands pressed flat against the glass as though he was hoping to fall right through it and reach them. He had a powerful kind of ache inside him, half joy, half terrible sadness. How long he stood there he didn't know. The reflections did not fade, and he looked and looked until a distant noise brought him back to his senses. He couldn't stay there. He had to find his way back to bed. He tore his eyes away from his mother's face, whispered, "I'll come back," and hurried from the room. "You could have woken me up," said Ron crossly. "You can come tonight. I'm going back, and I want to show you the mirror." "I'd like to see your mom and dad," Ron said eagerly, "and I want to see all your family and all the Weasleys. You'll be able to show me your other brothers and everyone. You can see them any old time," said Ron. "Just come around my house this summer. Anyway, maybe it only shows dead people. Shame about not finding Flamel, though. Have some bacon or something. Why aren't you eating anything?" Harry couldn't eat. He had seen his parents and would be seeing them again tonight. He had almost forgotten about Flamel. It didn't seem very important anymore. Who cared what the three-headed dog was guarding? What did it matter if Snape stole it, really? "Are you all right?" said Ron. "You look odd." I'm going to pause there for a little bit because I need a drink again. I'm like really thirsty. Plus, I need to check if my video is done. My old stream from yesterday is done editing. Not yet, but it edited the one, so it's just editing the other part now. So once that is trimmed, it'll be able to be seen again, but just some parts cut out. But that's why I am rereading the chapters that they cut out. So from now on, I gotta be very careful with my TV being on, which is stupid. So when I do streams in my room, I gotta make sure my TV is off. So yeah. All right, just a few more pages, then I'm done. What Harry feared most was that he might not be able to find the mirror room again. With Ron covered in the cloak, too, they had to walk much more slowly than the next night. They tried retracing Harry's route from the library, wandering around the dark passageways for nearly an hour. "I'm freezing," said Ron. "Let's forget it and go back." "No," Harry hissed. "I know it's here somewhere." They passed the ghost of a tall witch gliding the opposite direction, but saw no one else. Just as Ron started moaning that his feet were dead with cold, Harry spotted the suit of armor. "It's here, just here, yes." They pushed the door open. Harry dropped the cloak from around his shoulders and ran to the mirror. There they were. His mother and father beamed at the sight of him. "See," Harry whispered. "I can't see anything. Look at them all. There are loads of them. I can only see you. Look in it properly. Go and stand where I am." Harry stepped aside, but with Ron in front of the mirror, he couldn't see his family anymore. Just Ron in his paisley pajamas. Ron was staring transfixed at his image. Look at me," he said. "Can you see all your family standing around you?" "No, I'm alone, but I'm different. I look older, and I'm head boy." "What?" I'm wearing the badge like Bill used to, and I'm holding the house cup and the Quidditch cup. I'm Quidditch captain, too." Ron tore his eyes away from the splendid sight to look excitedly at Harry. "Do you think this mirror shows the future? How can it? All my family are dead." "Let me have another look." "You had it all to yourself all last night. Give me a bit more time. You're only holding the Quidditch cup. What's interesting about that? I want to see my parents." "Don't push me." A sudden noise outside in the corridor put an end to their discussion. They hadn't realized how loudly they had been talking. "Quick!" Ron threw the cloak back over them as the luminous eyes of Mrs. Norris came round the door. Ron and Harry stood quite still, both thinking the same thing. Did the cloak work on cats? After what seemed like an age, she turned and left. "This isn't safe. She might have gone for Filch. I bet she heard us. Come on." And Ron pulled Harry out of the room. The snow still hadn't melted the next morning. "Want to play chess, Harry?" said Ron. "No." "Why don't we go down and visit Hagrid?" "No, you go." "I know what you're thinking about, Harry. That mirror." "Don't go back tonight." "Why not?" "I don't know. I just got a bad feeling about it. And anyway, you had too many close shaves already. Filch, Snape, and Mrs. Norris are wandering around. So what if they can't see you? What if they walk into you? What if you knock something over? You sound like Hermione." "I'm serious, Harry. Don't go." But Harry only had one thought in his head, which was to get back in front of the mirror, and Ron wasn't going to stop him. That third night, he found his way more quickly than before. He was walking so fast, he knew he was making more noise than was wise, but he didn't need anyone. And there they were, his mother and father smiling at him again, and one of his grandfathers nodding happily. Harry sank down to the floor to sit on the floor in front of the mirror. There was nothing to stop him from staying here all night with his family, nothing at all, except sit back again, Harry. Harry felt as though his insides had turned to ice. He looked behind him. Sitting on one of the desks by the wall was none other than Albus Dumbledore. Harry must have walked straight past him, so desperate to get to the mirror he hadn't noticed him. I didn't see you, sir. Strange how nearsighted being invisible can make you, said Dumbledore, and Harry was relieved to see that he was smiling. So, said Dumbledore, slipping off the desk to sit on the floor with Harry, you, like hundreds before you, have discovered the delights of the Mirror of Erised. I didn't know what it was called that, sir, but I expect you've realized by now what it does. It showed me my family, and it showed your friend Ron himself as head boy. How did you know? I don't need a cloak to become invisible, said Dumbledore gently. Now can you think what the Mirror of Erised shows us all? Harry shook his head. Let me explain. The happiest man on earth would be able to use the Mirror of Erised like a normal mirror, that is, he would look into it and see himself exactly as he is. Does that help? Harry thought, then he said slowly, it shows us what we want, whatever we want. Yes and no, said Dumbledore quietly. It shows us nothing more or less than the deepest, most desperate desire of our hearts. You, who have never known your family, see them standing around you. Ronald Weasley, who has always been overshadowed by his brothers, sees himself standing alone, the best of all of them. However, this mirror will give us neither knowledge or truth. Men have wasted away before it, entranced by what they have seen, or been driven mad, not knowing if what it shows is real or even possible. The mirror will be moved to a new home tomorrow, Harry, and I ask you not to go looking for it again. If you ever do run across it, you will now be prepared. It does not do to dwell on dreams and forget to live. Remember that. Now, why don't you put that admirable cloak back on and get off to bed? Harry stood up. Sir, Professor Dumbledore, can I ask you something? Obviously, you've just done so. Dumbledore smiled. You may ask me one more thing, however. What do you see in the mirror when you look in the mirror? I see myself holding a pair of thick woolen socks. Harry stared. One can never have enough socks, said Dumbledore. Another Christmas has come and gone, and I didn't get a single pair. People will insist on giving me books. It was only when he was back in bed that it struck Harry that Dumbledore might not have been quite truthful. But then he thought, as he shoved Scabbers off his pillow, it had been quite a personal question. And that was chapters 11 and 12. Reread because YouTube decided to be a butthole. So that is all for this stream. I know it's a little short than yesterday's, but we'll work with it. We'll work with it. Oof. Yeah, sorry. All right. Bye-bye.